Hello and welcome to Face, where we look at the world news from the Central Eastern European perspective. I'm Anna Kalczyńska, and joining me tonight is Michał Broniatowski, Editor-in-Chief of TVP World. Good evening, Michał.
Good evening.
So let me start by quoting the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, who commented on the economic threats made by Donald Trump. And he said, "We don't see any particular new elements here. But the Europeans, we see those new elements. We can even say that we see a hardening tone. We hear the hardening tone by Donald Trump. So can we say that Putin finally met his match?"
I don't know if it is his match. Whatever we can say about Trump, he's not invading any country in his neighborhood. So we should be careful with words. You know, when Peskov says that they haven't heard anything from Americans, it means that they don't want to discuss what is being demanded from them by President Trump. And this is a real change in the attitude of the American administration under the rule of Trump. A few months ago, then candidate Trump was talking about his good relations with Moscow, which would help end the war. And now it appears it is Ukraine which wants peace, but Russia is being an obstacle. And so, by the way, this is a real strategic victory for President Zelensky, who changed his
I was going to ask you, who should be given the credit for the change of attitude?
I think elders in the room with Mr. Trump in the White House. But of course, President Zelensky helped in this because he changed his rhetorics. He's no longer saying no way that we can start talking with Russians as long as they stay on our territory, for example. So no ceasefire, only big peace, and so on. Now he's saying he is ready to talk.
Exactly.
The result of which is that the rhetorics of Mr. Trump have changed. You know, the ball is on the court of Russia, exactly, which it wasn't.
So the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Radosław Sikorski, even called Marco Rubio, thanking for this change of attitude and the exact words on taxes, tariffs, sanctions, which were coming if Putin didn't change his attitude. But who do you think has the upper hand right now, Putin or Trump?
There are no circumstances in the world now that Mr. Putin can have upper hand, especially in opposite to Trump. Even if we account for his relative successes recently on the front in Donbass, he's still a loser in this war, which is supposed to last 3 days. It lasts 3 years. Enlargement of NATO, the change of the attitude of the world towards Ukraine, him being, in fact, the pariah of the international relations. So I think that sooner or later we will have some sort of solution in Ukraine, and this will mean some sort of territorial decisions on the part of compromise,
exactly,
on the part of Ukraine. But it seems Ukrainians are already resigned to it.
I expect, Michał, that you might agree with me when I'm saying that we here in the East understand this firm language better than the West does, and we understand also that Russia understands it. And so probably Kremlin's stance could change, don't you think, somehow?
Well, we will see what they do. They will not change their minds until they are forced to it. I'm sure they will be, especially given the attitude of the man who is in charge, which is Mr. Trump. He showed it very clearly during his appearance in Davos via video call, where the room in which he was listened to was packed to overflow and so on. And he came in like a CEO who is coming for a meeting, a weekly conference of his managers to tell them things they have to do. So he told Europe, let me look at my notes. EU needs to speed up its approval processes. Saudi Arabia should boost planned 600 billion investment to 1 trillion investment in oil drilling. You know, he tells them to increase it by a third. OPEC countries should lower oil prices. Canada should eliminate its trade deficit with the US, because if not, we will take them over as a 51st US state. And NATO countries should increase defense spending to 5%. So it's not even the full list of his demands. And then, you know, the guy is coming, making orders, using really blunt language. It's another call for Europeans to behave in a way, in a more unified way, and then use stronger language and really speed up decisions.
Exactly, because we must say also that some of those demands made by Donald Trump aren't completely illegitimate, right? Some of them are totally legitimate. Even Mark Rutte says that Europe is not spending enough, and that this 5% threshold is absolutely something which should be taken into consideration. Just remember that 8 countries, members of NATO, do not even match the 2% threshold so far.
Which is a quarter of all the countries.
Exactly.
Yes, but this 5%, of course, is something which is unreal or unrealistic. The only country which is in NATO, which is spending more than 4%, is Poland. This year it will be 4.7%. But, you know, this resolve in decisions on defense is proportional to the distance from Russian border. Mm-hmm. So the farther you go.
Obviously.
Yes, in Spain they can hardly come to 1.5%. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, when he was speaking to the European Parliament a few days ago, he said that this 5% is no exaggeration, because we need now to invest in defense in order to be able to face a possible aggression, invasion on the part of Russia. He didn't name Russia, but he also, of course, meant it. And he also said that it doesn't have to be forever, but we need to do it now. We need to do a real effort to show the Kremlin that Europe wants to defend itself and Europe is investing in it.
And is capable of it. Yes, it wasn't Donald Tusk, it was Mark Rutte who said that NATO collectively is not able to defend itself in 4 or 5 years from here if they stick to 2%. So everyone understands it's obviously important to increase those spendings.
The problem is that not everyone.
Exactly, and not everyone.
We at this table and a few other people in Europe do understand, but there are enough of those who don't understand, or understand but don't want to draw any conclusions of it, because they have issues with the next election, questions about housing, for example. We heard it in Parliament, in the European Parliament, that the policy on housing of the European Union should be much braver than its spending on defense.
That's true. So since you mentioned Donald Tusk, his speech in Strasbourg in front of the European Parliament was characterized by some as a call to arms, even. It was indeed a very bold, a very symbolic speech, and he made a reference to both Polish national anthem, Poland will not die as long as we live, and he made reference to Alexander the Great and Christopher Columbus. But as Donald Tusk said, it is important to remind the Europeans the great moments of Europe, because they changed the world. So what do you make of this speech? How important it was?
Well, you know, it was the first speech in many years in the European Parliament in which a leader would be so much looking forward rather than moaning about the future and how hard it is to live here. He told Europe, get yourself together and do something. He told Europe that economizing on security is a suicide. If Europe wants to survive, it must be armed, and Poland is here a good example. He was not specifying who is against of it, but of course everybody knows that He's talking about Germany, which is refusing to organize proper financing for defense. This proper financing would be emission of debt by members of the European Union, with the Union being in charge of it. So, as it was with the fund for COVID reconstruction. So, I think sooner or later we will see this money coming, because otherwise there's no chance for Europe to be a military match for American might.
And what do you think should happen for the Europeans to understand the reality of the threat and to finally increase the spending? Do you think that perhaps simply the government in Germany has to change?
It will help. Because
there's a lack of political will, simply.
You know, politicians want something, they have a will, when they see it helps them in elections. And apparently Mr. Scholz, who is current chancellor and is probably going to lose elections in 1 month's time in Germany, he decided that he should play traditional, after the Second World War, pacifism of German public. And he's playing to it, for example, not agreeing for bigger military spending or bigger involvement in the war on the front in Ukraine. So probable new Chancellor Merz, who is in charge of the CDU party, he will probably take another approach to this, and he will spend more money and take bolder decisions. We will see, but it's not only Germany, of course. Germany is biggest, but there are a lot of countries which are safely far away from Russia for possible Russian invasion, and they see that their electoral problems now or in a few years are more important than the safety of the EU borders.
By the way, Friedrich Merz just announced that he would like to see a potential new treaty with Poland if he becomes a new chancellor. So that also gives us a certain prospect for the future cooperation between the two countries. But what else do you think, apart from ramping up militarily, could Europe do to fight the Russian threat, simply?
You know, it's nothing more. What Europe is doing, what the European Union is doing to defend itself from Russian aggression, it's very tightly described in treaties. Europe cannot. The European Union is not a military organization, so Europe should be more resolute inside NATO and, for example, increase military spending. But European Union, which has no right to create its own military forces, it can finance defense spending, help defense spending. It's a political decision. And this fund, which Mrs. von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, says that some 500 billion euros over the next 5 years should be a minimum to spend on arms.
And how about the sanctions? Another way of getting the grip on
sanctions
Russia.
Are in place. Of course, you can find more places to impose sanctions or to be more to scrutinize their implementation more boldly, I would say. But I don't think here we need to push anybody apart of Mr. Orban, who may apply his veto again. However, he would be really lonely very lonely in his attitude, because his friend Trump is already pointing his finger on Russia, whom Mr. Orban would like to protect against sanctions. And seems to me that this weapon is already taken away from his hands.
Yes, this Donald Trump stance came as a little surprise, probably, to Viktor Orban and to Robert Fico. Let's go now to Belarus, which is holding elections, so-called presidential elections, we should say, this Sunday. We remember the 2020 election and the public response to the rigged vote. So at that time, it seemed that Belarus was close to freeing itself from the Lukashenko regime. But now the situation looks significantly different, with no real opposition, however, with co-runners. So who are they?
I think it's an overstatement to call these people co-runners. They were necessary for Mr. Lukashenko to pretend that this event in which Belarusians will participate on Sunday. However, they can vote already. Preliminary voting started on Tuesday. You know, he needs to make pretense that it is election. So he has some people on the list, on the voting list. Some of them declared that they are running, but they support the presidency of Mr. Lukashenko. It's the same attitude as the so-called opposition candidates in Russian elections a few years ago, in which they were saying, well, we want Putin to win, even if we participate in this election. So, you know, if you look at that, it's really, using the word outrageous is
not enough.
It's not enough. Yes.
That's true. But at the same time, 1,200 people identified by human rights groups as political prisoners remain behind the bars. However, Lukashenko has often tried to walk a fine line between the West and the East. He released 8 political figures, but with those numbers behind the bars and unknown number of people imprisoned for political reasons that we know that could be much higher. So what is the real power of Lukashenko with the whole opposition against him, with society, the political class? So what does he rely on, actually?
He's relying on his
in the military
foundations of the dictatorship, which is the army, which is security services, and all state apparatus is supporting him. The same case applied to the elections 4 years ago, but at that time, from his point of view, he made a mistake to allow opposition to present their candidates, and probably for the first time in his nearly 30 years in power, for the first time he lost the election, because according to independent counting, Mrs. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya got about 57%. So he didn't make this mistake again this time. He has all the opposition whom he could find in Belarus. He has them all behind bars. He banned any form of dissent. There's no real opposition candidates who are allowed to run. So we can say that elections are already decided. The question is only how big percentage of the vote will be for Mr. Lukashenko. But such elections are also a good test for him to learn how many people in fact voted against him, because of course he will not publish it, but they will know what was the real turnout and how many people crossed off every candidate, voted for somebody else, and this can be a sort of a plebiscite for him to learn what is his real power or support of the public.
Although many people can simply vote out of fear, right? So they will never disclose their real
Yes, but attitudes. You know, in a voting box, when you're locked, you can do whatever you like.
The turnout also matters, right?
The turnout will be very important to see, because if it is extremely low, then he has a problem, because he has a problem also in front of Putin, whom we say you have no legitimacy to stay in power.
Thank you very much, Michał, for your insights, for your expertise. We're looking forward to these elections on Sunday, so we will, of course, tell you about them here on TVP World. So thank you very much for watching this edition of Face to Face, and please join us on Monday as we're coming back, and stay tuned to TVP World for more news and more commentary. Thank you. See you soon.